Dear spectators of the human tragedy, in the shadows of this dimly lit room, I sit, a sardonic smile plastered on my face, a mask to hide the turmoil brewing within. You see, strength is but a facade, a fragile veil draped over the aching void that whispers secrets of neglect. Here, in the silence, I reflect on a bitter lesson learned, the lesson of absence. Pride, that wretched beast, it blinds us, doesn't it? We strut around, puffed up like peacocks, failing to see the brilliance in those we dismiss. We convince ourselves that our worth is the only worth that matters, while the world outside spins in a chaotic ballet of forgotten souls. I was one of those souls, overlooked, undervalued. My worth was a hidden gem, buried beneath layers of arrogance and scorn. Only in hindsight do I see it, like a flickering candle in the dark, illuminating the shadows of my own ignorance. Betrayal, the cruelest of all sins. It leaves scars deeper than any blade, carving memories into the flesh of our existence. When the winds of change swept through, I felt the sharp sting of betrayal. It echoed through the corridors of my mind. Absence became not just a void, but a punishment, a lesson writ in silence. Those who feasted on my presence, who reveled in my laughter, suddenly found themselves starved of what they had taken for granted. And in their hunger, they learned that absence is a bitter pill to swallow. Picture this: the room grows colder as the shadows lengthen, and I am left to ponder the price of my pride. I can still hear the echoes of laughter that once filled this space, now replaced by the haunting silence of neglect. I was there, always present, yet invisible, a ghost wandering through the halls of their lives. They saw no worth in me until my absence became the very punishment they couldn't escape. As I sit here, the walls whisper tales of arrogance, tales that claw at the heart of relationships. They walked through life, oblivious to the value of those around them, blinded by their own delusions of grandeur. They thought power was a crown, a title to wear, but power is a fleeting shadow, slipping through grasping fingers. It was in their moments of dismissal that they crafted the very chains that would bind them to regret. Oh, how deliciously ironic it is that absence, once a weapon wielded against me, has now become a double-edged sword. They didn't realize that in pushing me away, they were carving their own fate. They learned, too late, that neglect breeds a harvest of sorrow. And as the days turned to weeks, their smiles faded, replaced by the weight of realization. They stood in the ruins of their choices, bricks of arrogance crumbling beneath the weight of regret. So here I am, the anti-hero, cloaked in shadows, finding strength in solitude. I have learned that absence is not merely a void, it is a profound teacher. It has shown me the beauty of resilience, the power of self-worth. In my solitude, I have become a fortress, impervious to the wounds of the past. The darkness that once threatened to consume me has transformed into a sanctuary, a place where I can reflect on the folly of others. And as I gaze into the abyss, I urge you to ponder your own relationships. Remember, neglect is a thief, stealing away the light of those who stand beside you. The lesson of absence is a bitter one, but it is one that must be embraced, a reminder that every moment wasted is a moment lost forever. So, take heed, for the echoes of your actions will reverberate long after you've left the room. In the depths of this forsaken solitude, I rummage through the remnants of a shattered connection, a tapestry woven with threads of disdain and arrogance. There she stood, a dismissive figure cloaked in the garb of superiority, her laughter ringing hollow in the air. To her, I was but a shadow, an afterthought in a world where she reigned supreme. The irony, of course, is that shadows can consume the light, and light can blind those who forget its source. The nature of our relationship was a dance of power and vulnerability, a macabre waltz where I, the unseen partner, twirled in the dark, longing for recognition. Each interaction dripped with a condescension that cut deeper than any blade. She would toss words like breadcrumbs, expecting me to scavenge for scraps of acknowledgement, while I, the anti-hero, stood there, a silent sentinel, absorbing the sting of her indifference. In her eyes, I was a mere pawn, a piece to be moved and discarded at will. Yet beneath that dismissive veneer, there lay a glimmer of something more, a fear, perhaps. the fear of what my presence truly represented. I was the mirror reflecting her insecurities, the embodiment of every flaw she masked with arrogance. In those moments of dismissal, she fortified her delusions, believing that power was hers to wield without consequence. But power, my dear, is a fickle mistress. It dances on the edge of a knife, and one day, that blade may cut deeper than expected. The arrogance that dripped from her words was a poison, seeping into the cracks of our connection. She believed herself untouchable, a queen ruling over a kingdom of illusions. But in her quest for dominance, she failed to see the cracks forming beneath her throne. The more she dismissed me, the more she isolated herself, encasing her heart in a fortress of pride. Little did she know, the very chains she forged would bind her to a future of regret. And no, the delusions of superiority. They clouded her judgment like a thick fog, obscuring the truth that lay before her. In her eyes, I was invisible, a mere specter haunting her path. But the truth is a relentless beast, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the opportune moment to strike. And when it does, it reveals the fragility of the bonds we take for granted. The moment our connection began to unravel was a catalyst for conflict, igniting a firestorm of emotions that both terrified and exhilarated me. It was as if the universe conspired to lay bare the truth behind our interactions. Miscommunication, like a thief in the night, crept in, fueled by assumptions and pride. In that moment, the walls I had carefully built to shield my heart began to crumble, and I stood exposed, raw, and vulnerable. As I reflect on those choices, my choices and hers, I cannot help but marvel at the inevitability of consequences. The neglect we both embraced grew into a monstrous entity, feasting on the remnants of what could have been. It gnawed at the edges of our relationship, leaving nothing but echoes of regret in its wake. We were two ships passing in the night, oblivious to the storm brewing just beneath the surface. In the aftermath, I became acutely aware of the power dynamics shifting like the tides. I transformed, no longer the pawn but the architect of my own fate. Solitude became my sanctuary, a refuge where I could strip away the layers of pain and emerge anew. The very absence that was meant to punish me became my weapon, my strength. As I sit in this darkness, I urge you to examine the relationships in your own life. The dismissive ones, the arrogant ones, do not let pride blind you to their value. Because when the dust settles and the echoes of your actions reverberate in the silence, you may find that the absence of those you once took for granted is a punishment far harder to bear than any wound inflicted by betrayal. In the shadows of what remained, the rift between us widened like a chasm carved by relentless storms. A moment, a fleeting flicker of anger, ignited the tempest, a catalyst that shattered the fragile glass of our connection. The air thickened with tension, a palpable force that crackled like static before a lightning strike, and I could feel the ground beneath my feet tremble. It was in that instant that the floodgates opened, unleashing a torrent of emotions that would drown us both. Miscommunication, that deceitful phantom, danced around us, whispering lies and sowing discord in the fertile soil of pride. We had become blind architects of our own collapse, constructing a fortress of misunderstandings that none could breach. I saw her lips move, heard the words slice through the silence, but the meaning was lost in translation, a cruel game of charades where neither of us understood the rules. The very essence of our relationship was reduced to a battle of egos, each unwilling to concede, each too proud to extend an olive branch. From my vantage point, I witnessed the unraveling. I was both the spectator and the player, trapped in this twisted theater of vulnerability and disdain. Choices, oh how they echoed through the corridors of our minds. Each decision a brick in the wall that separated us, each silence a wound that festered and refused to heal. I had hoped for reconciliation, for clarity, but instead, the space between us grew heavy with unspoken words and unmet needs. The irony of it all. In the pursuit of power, we had traded away our humanity. I, once the shadow in her light, became the specter of her downfall. The isolation I felt was a double-edged sword, slicing through the pretense of our connection, revealing the raw truth beneath. I was no longer the one who longed for recognition, I was the one who awakened to the reality of my own worth, a truth that had eluded me for far too long. Each choice laid bare the consequences we both feared. I could see the weight of regret pulling at her, a relentless anchor dragging her deeper into the abyss. And in a cruel twist of fate, my absence became her prison, a punishment that echoed louder than any words spoken in anger. She had taken me for granted, believing I would remain a constant in her life, a mere background player in her grand narrative. But life, my dear, is not a script we can control. It twists and turns like a serpent, and when you least expect it, it strikes. The isolation I endured morphed into a sanctuary, a crucible where the dross of my pain was transformed into something formidable. I emerged from that solitude stronger, sharper, like a blade honed by fire. The absence she believed would extinguish my flame only fueled it, igniting a firestorm of realization. I learned that power is not a gift bestowed, it is forged in the furnace of experience, tempered by the trials we face. As I stand on the precipice of this revelation, I urge the audience to confront the uncomfortable truths of their own lives. The rifts you ignore, the dismissals you allow, do not let them fester into a darkness that consumes. Because when the dust settles, and the echoes of your choices reverberate in the silence, you may find that the absence of those you once undervalued is not a void to be filled, but a lesson carved into the very fabric of your existence. In the end, it is the absence that teaches us the true measure of worth, and the price we pay for our arrogance is a toll that time will collect. In the silent aftermath of the storm, absence hung in the air like an uninvited guest, a specter that lingered in the corners of my mind. It is here, in this hollow space, that I discovered the weight of regret, an anchor dragging me into the depths of my own despair. The echoes of what was left behind resounded in my ears, a haunting melody that played on repeat. It was a cruel irony, for in my departure, I had unwittingly gifted her a lesson wrapped in solitude, a truth so sharp it could cut through the thickest fog of pride. Regret is a heavy cloak, and she wore it well. Each day that passed without my shadow beside her, I could feel her struggle as the realization crept in, like a thief in the night. She was trapped in a cage of her own making, the bars constructed from neglect and disdain. Oh, how the mighty can fall! In her pursuit of dominance, she had failed to see the fragile threads that held us together, and now those threads lay frayed, remnants of a bond that could have been. The absence I created was not merely a void, it was a mirror reflecting back the choices we both made, and the truths we shunned. Time, that relentless judge, began to unfurl its cruel tapestry. The moments once taken for granted became precious jewels, glimmering in the shadows of her memory. Each laugh we shared, each whispered secret, transformed into ghosts that haunted her waking hours. The realization that she had dismissed me, that she had relegated me to the background of her life, became a bitter pill to swallow. I was not the fool who clung to shadows, I was the flame she chose to extinguish, only for her to discover that flames can ignite anew in the dark. In the solitude of my own making, I found strength, a fortitude forged in the fires of abandonment. With each passing day, I learned to embrace the silence, to dance with the specters of my past. It was here that I unearthed the roots of my own worth, buried beneath layers of rejection and scorn. I became the architect of my own resurrection, and with that, I transformed the pain of absence into a weapon of understanding. The irony, dear audience, is hard to ignore. The lesson of worth is often wrapped in the very absence that we fear. It is a cruel twist, but a necessary one. In the shadows of neglect, we often find the light we have been searching for. My departure was not a failure, but an awakening, a clarion call to recognize the value of presence before it slips through our fingers like grains of sand. And let me tell you, absence is a teacher unlike any other. It reveals the fragility of our connections and the consequences of our choices. It forces us to confront the uncomfortable truths we bury beneath layers of arrogance. It strips away the pretense and lays bare the essence of who we are and who we could have been together. The absence I created became a profound lesson, a testament to the fallibility of pride. So, as I stand here, I urge you to look around. Embrace the people in your life, for the emptiness that follows neglect is a punishment that echoes louder than any confrontation. Recognize their worth before absence becomes your only companion. Because at the end of this twisted journey we call life, it is not the accolades or the power we wield that measure our success, but the connections we nurture and the love we share. Time is both a healer and a judge, and it will collect its toll. And when it does, may you find that the lessons learned in the wake of absence are the very foundations upon which you build your future. It is in this darkness that we find our true selves, and perhaps, just perhaps, we learn to value the light we once took for granted. Power, like a raging tempest, often blinds those who wield it. It wraps around them a cloak of invincibility, while they dance on the strings of others, oblivious to the fraying threads beneath their feet. In the darkness of solitude, I learned that this illusion of control is but a fragile mirage, shimmering on the horizon of one's own arrogance. The fortress built on the backs of the underestimated crumbles, piece by piece, when the very foundation of neglect gives way. The air was thick with the scent of betrayal, a stench that clung to the walls, reminding me of the relationships that had decayed under the weight of pride. It is a bitter truth that those who elevate themselves often do so by stepping on the very people who once stood beside them. The dismissive character in my life, with their haughty laughter and dismissive words, was a master puppeteer, blind to the strings they themselves snapped. But as I withdrew into the shadows, a metamorphosis began, like a phoenix rising from the ashes of their disdain. Solitude, once a prison, transformed into a sanctuary. Each moment spent in the company of my own thoughts was a moment of clarity. I watched as the scales of power tilted, and the weight of neglect became a burden far heavier than any crown. I became the architect of my own fate, carving strength from the void they had created. It was a revelation, a brutal awakening, that power is not merely about domination, it is about the respect and recognition of every individual that walks this earth. How often do we mistake arrogance for strength? How often do we assume that our position grants us immunity from the consequences of our actions? The truth is, power is a double-edged sword. It can elevate or obliterate, depending on how it is wielded. I watched as the chains of superiority wrapped tighter around the dismissive character, binding them in their own arrogance. They believed they could cast me aside, but little did they know that the very act of dismissal would sow the seeds of their own isolation. In the echoing silence of my absence, I discovered the paradox of solitude. It became both a punishment and a refuge, a sanctuary where I could heal the wounds inflicted by those who failed to see my worth. As they reveled in their perceived triumph, little did they grasp that the void I left was a chasm of realization, a dark abyss that called them to confront the consequences of their choices. The laughter that once echoed in their halls now rang hollow, a ghost of what once was. Power dynamics shift in the blink of an eye. One day you are at the summit, and the next, you find yourself in the valley, swallowed by the shadows of your own making. It is in this ebb and flow that we learn the true nature of our connections. They are not merely tools to be used and discarded, they are lifelines, fragile and precious. The dismissive character, in their arrogance, failed to understand that power is not defined by the ability to command, but by the capacity to nurture. As the days turned into weeks, the realization began to gnaw at them. My absence, once a fleeting thought, became an inescapable truth. With every moment spent in solitude, I learned to wield my own power, not through domination, but through understanding. I emerged stronger, not as a conqueror, but as a survivor of my own design. The darkness became my ally, a canvas upon which I painted my own narrative, one of resilience and rebirth. And as I stand here now, I remind you of this: the consequences of isolation are profound. They echo through the corridors of time, leaving behind whispers of what could have been. The lesson is simple yet haunting: do not take for granted the people who stand beside you. Power is an illusion that can vanish as quickly as it is gained, but the bonds we forge are the true testament to our strength. In the end, it is the connections we nurture, the respect we extend, and the love we offer that define our legacy. So tread lightly, for the shadows of neglect are watching, waiting to reveal the truth we often hide from ourselves. Embrace the darkness, let it guide you, and remember that in every absence, there lies a lesson, a chance to grow, to understand, and to value. In the aftermath of chaos, where the echoes of laughter once filled the air, a haunting silence settles like dust on forgotten memories. It is here, in this desolate expanse of solitude, that I found the crumbling remains of human connections, fragile as glass, shattered under the weight of neglect. People drift through life like shadows, unaware of the light they extinguish when they choose arrogance over awareness. And in this darkness, the truth reveals itself, stark and unyielding, like a blade cutting through the fabric of delusion. Relationships, oh, how they unravel like threads pulled from a frayed tapestry. Each moment of disregard creates a gap, a void where once there was warmth. Yet, those who wield power so carelessly often fail to see the cracks forming beneath their feet. They stride through life, heads held high, blinding themselves to the fragility of the bonds they exploit. But let me tell you, the heart does not forget. It remembers every slight, every dismissive wave, each moment that chipped away at the foundation of trust. Justice, in its twisted form, is not always about vengeance. No, it lurks in the shadows, waiting for the right time to reveal itself. It is the bitter sweetness that drips from the wounds of regret, staining the very essence of what one thought they could command. Time, the ultimate arbiter, does not rush, it hammers, slowly and methodically, until the truth emerges from the depths of denial. Those who overlooked my worth now find themselves grappling with the heavy chains of their own making, shackled by the realization that they let something precious slip through their fingers. Yet, there is a cruel irony in this awakening. The moment they realize what they have lost is often the moment and it is irrevocably gone. Like a ship lost at sea, they drift in a storm of their own creation, desperately seeking the lighthouse they once took for granted. The irony stings, doesn't it? They stand alone, consumed by the shadows they cast upon others, and now, those very shadows whisper the truth they long evaded. Value resides not in the crown one wears, but in the hearts one nurtures. What does it mean to recognize the worth of another? It is a lesson taught through the harshest of realities. The dismissive character in my life, they wielded their power like a hammer, forging their superiority through the fire of arrogance. But as the anvil of time strikes, the metal cools, revealing the cracks that marred their creation. They become a reflection of their own dismissals, a tapestry woven with threads of solitude and regret. Taking others for granted is a dance with the abyss. The void left by absence is not empty, it is filled with lessons, echoes of laughter turned to whispers of sorrow. Those who ignored my worth found themselves at the edge of a precipice, staring into the depths of their own loneliness, realizing too late the price of neglect. And so, I stand as a testament to the power of absence, a figure cloaked in darkness, embodying the bitter truths that linger in the air like smoke from a dying fire. The time has come for a reckoning. Let the dismissive character face the consequences of their choices. They sought to belittle, to diminish, but in doing so, they lost the very essence of what it means to be human. The lesson is clear: neglect is a thief, stealing not just relationships but the very soul of those who wield it. And as the darkness deepens, so too does the understanding that every absence carries weight, a reminder that resonates long after the final curtain falls. So, reflect on this. Are you nurturing the connections that matter, or are you dancing on the strings of neglect? Do not wait for the shadows to remind you of the light you took for granted. Embrace the darkness, for it holds the truths you fear to confront. In this haunting silence, the echoes of relationships lost will guide you, urging you to cherish the bonds that define your existence. Time, relentless and unforgiving, will reveal all. Let it not be too late for you. In the cavernous depths of solitude, where echoes of laughter fade into haunting whispers, I stand, a specter of my own making. The darkness wraps around me like a shroud, a comforting embrace forged from the ashes of betrayal and neglect. It is here that I discovered a truth as sharp as shattered glass. Strength is born in the silence of absence, a sanctuary where the scars of the past become armor against the world. In this void, I found clarity, and with it, the realization that solitude is not merely a prison, it is a crucible, forging resilience in the fires of despair. For too long, I wore the mask of the jester, dancing for those who never truly saw me. Their laughter, a hollow echo, rang in my ears as I played the part of the fool, all the while feeling the weight of their dismissive glances like chains around my neck. But in the stillness that followed my departure, I shed that guise and embraced the darkness that lay ahead. The shadows became my allies, whispering secrets of power and self-discovery, teaching me that there is a fierce beauty in solitude, a strength that blooms in the absence of validation. Lessons learned from absence are not gentle, nor are they kind. They come crashing like waves against the jagged rocks of our choices, leaving behind the debris of what once was. I have tasted the bitterness of loss, and yet, in each painful moment, I found a flicker of illumination. It is in these darkest hours that the soul is laid bare, stripped of pretense, allowing the raw essence of who we are to emerge. I learned to recognize the value of relationships not through the lens of others, but through the clarity that solitude offers, a lens free of distortion, pure and unyielding. To those who remain shackled by their own arrogance, take heed. The fortress of solitude is not built to keep others out but to fortify the self. In that space, I discovered the power of reflection, a mirror held up to the soul, revealing the truths we often hide. It is a dangerous game, this dance of neglect, where one partner's pride can lead to the other's isolation. But here's the kicker, the absence of one can illuminate the worth of many. I emerged from the shadows not as a victim, but as a beacon, a reminder that neglect weighs heavier than the mightiest of chains. And now, I extend the challenge to you, to those who tread the fine line between presence and absence, reflect on your own relationships. Are you cherishing the moments that matter, or are you allowing the bitter taste of neglect to seep into the cracks of your connections? The darkness is relentless in its pursuit of truth, and it will not hesitate to expose the fragile nature of your bonds. Do not wait for the specter of regret to knock at your door, begging for entry. Embrace the shadows, for they hold the wisdom you desperately need. The time for reckoning has arrived. There is power in the understanding that solitude can be both a punishment and a refuge. It is a paradox that many fail to grasp until it is too late. The dismissive figure in my life learned this lesson the hard way, their arrogance stripped away by the relentless passage of time. Now they stand alone, grappling with the weight of their choices, a testament to the fact that neglect is a thief in the night, stealing not just relationships but the very essence of what it means to be human. So, as I stand in this silence, I urge you to seek the light in your connections before you find yourself wandering in the desolation of absence. The shadows will always linger, but they need not define you. Instead, let them be a reminder of the power you possess, the power to nurture, to value, and to cherish. In the darkness, you will find your strength, and from that strength, you can forge a path toward a future filled with connection and understanding. Time waits for no one, and it is time for you to recognize the worth that lies within each bond you hold dear. Embrace the darkness, for only then can you truly appreciate the light. Share this message if you understand that true strength is forged in the shadows, where resilience is born from the ashes of neglect. Leave a comment below about a moment when solitude revealed your true power, and subscribe for more raw insights into the darkness that shapes us. Remember, in the depths of despair, we find the clarity to rise and reclaim what is rightfully ours. Embrace the shadows, for they hold the key to your transformation.